We now return to Let's Play Suzerain. Let's continue to the next turn. The Trials of Democracy. Any day now. Here we go. New news. Sordland today. School poisoning in Rybel. Police have arrested the principal of a high school in Rybel in southern Bergia, where 12 students died after eating a free meal laced with pesticide. The students, aged between 15 and 17, died after eating a lunch of local dish of zabla, cooked at the school in a poverty-stricken city. Police have started the investigation to solve the mystery of how the pesticide ended up in the food. Oh boy. Radical. Time for women to stand up. The women in Sordland have always been under pressure by the unequal society and the system of discrimination that was built by old men who only knew about war, said Katarina Horton in a women's rally that was held in Holsword yesterday. Swordish League of Women is organizing a number of rallies across Sordland to bring the change Sordland desperately needs. It is time for Sordland to realize that we have to respect every individual regardless of their sex and strive to become an advanced civilization. Women have long been pushed to the corners of the social and political life. To address this change, a new campaign was started all over Sordland to establish a framework for women's rights. Swordish League of Women is organizing rallies with the support of from the Ministry of Education, with the support from Minister of Education, Tiara Walda, and Member of the Assembly, Katarina Horton. Everybody is equal according to the Swordish Constitution, but there are no protections against discrimination, which only reinforces the inequality in practice, said Walda in a press conference. This movement must be supported by all Swordish women as well as men. We need to bring change now. We can do it. Let's see about Tiara Walda. Tiara Walda is an academician and politician who serves as Minister of Education, Technology, and Research of Sordland. She became a member of the United Sordland Party before the 1953 elections. Prior to becoming a minister, she was elected and served as an independent MP. As a member of the Assembly, Tiara has been aggressively promoting educational reforms and supported socialist politics. Although she's been targeted many times for her ideals, she remains a popular politician. Particularly among women. She is a staunch supporter of women's rights and slowly gaining fame among the reformists for her progressive rhetoric. Before her political career, Ciara taught philosophy and political sciences in several major universities, including the Lockhaven Business School and Dare University of Culture. She has written many academic articles, some of which were published in well-respected journals worldwide. Ciara joined United Sordland to campaign for Anton Rayne's candidacy in an effort to reform the governing body of the party. Okay. Katarina Horton, Swordish labor leader, politician, and activist for British descent, member of the Assembly, and current spokesperson of the Labour Union of Sordland. Born in Dare, Bergia, to Swordish British family, Horton began her working life as a manual laborer before studying law at the Holsword State University. Relocating to Holsword, where she married, she got involved in the Sordland headquarters of the Watchtower of Human Rights, through which she helped laborers register to vote. In 1942, she became the WHR's Sordland director. Later in 1948, she left the WHR to join the Labour Union of Sordland, through which she launched an insurance scheme and a local newspaper for Bergen farm workers. She began organizing strikes among farm workers, some of which had been successful. Horton is known for her emphasis on direct but nonviolent tactics to pressure the state and the farm owners into granting the demands of the strikers. Receiving much support from labor and leftist groups, she was appointed as spokesperson of the Labour Union of Sordland in 1950. In the 1953 election, she ran as an independent and was elected to be a member of the Assembly. Interesting. Questioning Solist education. The newly unveiled SIPA Education Performance Report unveiled a sad reality about Sordland's abysmal status in comparison to many countries. Sordland was rated 39th out of the 68 nations that were assessed by the OMEC organization. The primary gauge of the quality of education is made from a sample of 16-year-olds from each nation and their capacity in fields like mathematics, history, chemistry, and many others. One of the key issues was seen as the strong focus on history and citizenship classes leaving little time for scientific fields. Minister Walda often mentioned the gaps in the system in her assembly debates before she joined the cabinet. This is also supported by one of our editors, a professor from Holsworth State, who had long been critical of the situation in secondary education. The SIPR report reveals the damning truth that solist education, based on the principles of statism, nationalism, republicanism, poisons the bright minds of our children. We need to rid the system from the poison that is ideological indoctrination and let our future generations think for themselves. The Economist's upcoming government budget changes. As the top economy experts in the country, we have been watching the upcoming changes to the government budget very closely. President Anton Rayne's first internal economical challenge lies ahead, and we will see if he can prove his capabilities as a leader who can think ahead. The potential ramifications of diverting the funding to certain governmental branches has always been a point of contention for any leader, and it is no different for this case. We will see if President Rayne can hold on to the promises he has given during the election campaign. Geopolitico. Van Horten blames Vogsland for the missing fishing vessel. On Tuesday morning, Agnolia's Prime Minister Van Horten has made a statement denouncing Vogsland for the missing vessel, hull number whatever. Our dutiful Coast Guards have rescued a crew member of the missing vessel. Through his statement, we had learned the ship's unfortunate end was none other than Vogslandian Navy. However, the Prime Minister has refused to disclose the surviving crew member due to fear of an assassination attempt from Vogsland to cover up their hostility, as the minister later claimed. Oh boy. That's all we need right now. That is all we need right now. We cannot get involved in a conflict here when we are about to be involved in a very big conflict here. This is not good. Read the report from Boren. Communist books burned in Boren. Local residents gathered thousands of books that they claimed to be spreading communist and millennialist propaganda at the Century Park in Boren and set the books on fire. Aggressive slogans targeting the Red Youth, the Workers' Party of Bludia, and the Communist Party of Sordland were shouted. Youth groups from the local party offices of the USP and NFP also joined in with the burning. The fire department was dispatched, and the protesters dispersed on their own. Not so good. Young swords and NFP flags burned. Well, there you go. A massive counter-protest against young swords, led by a local politician known to be aligned with the Red Youth, resulted in many injuries and property damage. Subsequently, young swords and National Front Party flags were burned, which caused tensions to escalate. Local police dispersed the protesters by sundown. Sarna. Bloodish resistance in the sanctuaries. Security units have arrested 3 priests at 2 different Nuriti sanctuaries in Sarna after finding links to insurgent activities. The report came from an elderly man who wanted to pray in peace, but instead found himself invited to join the Bloodish Freedom Front by a state-sanctioned priest. Further incidents indicate that the BFF is pushing for a local recruitment drive in different sanctuaries across the region. Narble reports lack of hospitals. The mayor of Narble has reported that their hospitals are overburdened and they are unable to respond to the needs of the citizens. He complained about months-long waiting lists for terminally ill patients. On top of the capacity issues, it is also noted that the facilities are still largely using outdated technology. Lockhaven. Recession hits farmers again. As per the latest news from Lockhaven, the farming industry has taken another hit as a result of the recession. There are reports that 16% of all wheat in Lockhaven is rotting in barns due to a lack of buyers. Farmers are requesting additional funds from the government to survive the year. Oh boy, are we gonna have another one of those things mirroring real life where we have to do farm subsidies to keep farmers? Whatever. We'll get to it when we get to it. Barbecue with Frank, residence of the president. It was a Saturday afternoon, my first break from work in what felt like years, and the weather couldn't have been more perfect. Trying to keep my mind off the upheaval sparked by the circus assassination, I lit the backyard grill. Monica and Diana were out shopping for craft supplies, and I'd given the staff the day off. It was just myself and Frank at home. I wasn't sure how he felt about me at the moment, but I did know how he felt about barbecued ribs. Our cook had left some marinating in the refrigerator. Sure enough, as soon as Frank glimpsed the grill and the meat, he stepped outside to join me. I mean, we could needle him a little bit. Or we could treat him like an adult, I believe. Yeah, okay. Come to spend some quality time with your old man, have you? Sure, if you can spare a few minutes out of your busy schedule. I'm sorry, I know I haven't been around very often lately, but I'm happy to see you now. It's okay. I know you've got the most stressful job in the country, and you've got to feed your family on top of it all. We both chuckled. I turned to tend to the fire. Yeah, let me try. He grabbed the fan and started quickly waving it over the coals. The fire roared to life. He turned to look at me with a grin on his face, as if he was expecting praise. Good job. Not bad, son, not bad. Thank you, sir. It is in our utmost interest to fulfill our duties with precision. The grilling shall commence in exactly 1 minute and 32 seconds. That was a spot-on impersonation of Lucian. We looked at each other for a second, then burst out laughing. I realized my throat was parched. There was a 6-pack of beer in the kitchen. Why don't you bring us a couple beers? He looked at me in disbelief. You mean I can? But Mom told me... He stopped himself, quickly ran inside, and returned with 2 beers. We cracked them open, clinked the bottles, and gazed out at the city skyline. For a moment my thoughts flashed back to my childhood and my relationship with my own father. My father was a hard-working man, and always had our best interests in mind. Or at least that's what he always said. But he had a temper, and would lash out at my mother in fights I could hear from my bedroom. By the time I was Frank's age, we seldom spoke. Now that I was the president, I was facing more stress than my father ever had. I would have to work hard not to take my frustrations out on the family. Dad, can I ask you something? Wait for him to think about what to say? Or just, I mean, that's kind of, I don't know, like, are we just sitting there, like, looking at him oddly? That's weird. We'll go on. It's just, I feel like there's so much you've been hiding from me, about your past, about what's going on right now. Like at dinner that night after the ball, you told me everything was under control, but it wasn't, was it? I know what happened in the 20s, we learned all about it in school. Now with the protests and the riots, is it going to be the same thing? Dad, is there going to be a civil war in Sordland? I hope not. He let out a sigh. But what was it like back then? Uncle Peter said the 2 of you went through a lot. I'm not a kid anymore, you can tell me. Before I could gather my thoughts, the familiar images started flashing before my eyes. Images of soldiers advancing towards me and my friends, weapons drawn. Of people I knew, friends and neighbors, being dragged through the streets and murdered in alleyways. That little girl's face. They were dark times. Seems like it. But you're nearly a grown man, so let's talk about it. Frank leaned forward in his chair, his eyes wide. I mean, I don't know. In all honesty, I don't remember what happened first. Where are we at? History, timeline. That's too far back. Okay, so it was the coup that then... Yeah, okay. So the coup by Lutheran then followed the Civil War led by Ricard. So I guess we start with the coup then, huh? It was time to tell him about the coup in 1927. I was barely older than you are now. Studying history at the Dare University of Culture. I was a freshman, excited and young. I just left the classroom to go back home as I heard the sound of multiple vehicles approaching the campus gates. As they got closer, I realized they were military camouflage trucks and tanks carrying hundreds of soldiers. The same soldiers that were supposed to protect Sordland citizens pointed their guns at us. They immediately took control of the facilities. One of my friends asked what was going on and was arrested immediately. More people got angry and gathered to protest. Frank kept listening, a shocked look on his face. I mean, we could just be fully honest that we ran away, because he'll probably ask, well, what'd you do? Seeing the crowd gathering, I knew something was going to happen, something bad. I decided that it was impossible to go against armed men and ran away from the scene. Ran away from my friends who were getting arrested and shot to save my own dear life like a coward. I mean, I guess I could have stood my ground and got shot and or arrested, like the rest of them. My problem here is that I don't want to make this seem like we're telling him this was the unmanly thing to do, and then when we have problems, he's going to run and get himself shot. But at the same time, is he going to think less of me? I mean, obviously I feel justified because I chose the option, so let's just go with this. I still feel my flight was justified. Anyone would do the same. No one could sleep that night because of gunshots and sounds of boots. I can't forget the screams to this day. Frank leaned back in his chair, his shoulders slumped heavily. Tell him about the Civil War. It was right after I met your mother. We both joined the same political debate group to push for change after the coup of 27. Eventually, I became convinced I wasn't doing enough, so I joined the Red Youth. Tell Frank about the clash between Lutheran and Ricard. Then one night it happened. Two different factions in the army, one of them led by fascist General Lutheran, and the other by socialist General Ricard, started fighting each other. Okay. One of the... fuck. The way they used the commas in here to separate these is hard to read. It was a bloodbath. Nowhere was safe. Frank shifted in his seat, visibly uncomfortable. So we organized a protest, one day in support of Ricard. In our minds, he was the better of the two, and a true socialist. Do I need to tell him about the girl? I mean, I suppose telling him about the girl might humanize me a little bit. Yeah, okay, tell him about the girl. I paused a moment before continuing. It was horrible. They were waiting for us. Soldiers started beating and shooting at everyone and plowing their tanks into the crowd. Amid the chaos, there was this girl. I never forgot her face. I tried to save her, but I couldn't reach her in time. Frank's face had grown pale. He turned his eyes away from me. That's enough for today. It's okay. I'm sorry I shouldn't have asked you about it. I know I don't understand how easy my life is sometimes. One more thing, though. I know that you joined the Red Youth back then. Do you mind if I asked why? I mean, I had to survive somehow in that environment, and I made a choice. Frank raised his eyebrows, his curiosity still not satisfied, but sensing my reluctance to go on, he simply nodded. Sorry for bombarding you with questions. I know I complain sometimes, but my problems are nothing compared to what you went through. Oh, what problems? Before Frank could say anything else, I heard the front door unlock. Diana and Monica's voices and the sounds of rustling shopping bags filled the house. All right, I'll be upstairs until dinner. Frank went in and dashed upstairs. I took a long sip from my beer, looking at the city and the now setting sun. I hoped that talking to Frank about my past had been the right decision. Part of me felt as if some sort of burden had been lifted. But I had the same nightmares again that night. That's dark and grim. Attacker opened fire on protesters, 17 dead. A man opened fire in Vesord City Center during a protest march organized by the Communist Party of Sordland against the murder of Bernard Circus. The attacker used a military-grade machine gun dated 1929, which is suspected to be part of the inventory of the Sordish Armed Forces. The attacker killed himself right after shooting at 25 people, killing 16. Who was this? Oh, I suppose the gunman was 17. He took out the weapon from the newsstand at the square, brandished it, and yelled, "Come, I will give you my freedom," one witness said. The highly charged word freedom was previously associated with Blutish separatists, but has been used widely during the previous month of protests against the murder of Bernard Circus. Minister of the Interior, Lilias Graf, said that she had spoken to the chief of Vesord Police and asked him to take strict action. The government will not tolerate any such incident, and the perpetrators will not be spared, she said. Gelsord FC, Enrica FC Derby postponed due to the protests. One of the most anticipated matches between Gelsord and Enrica was postponed because of the intense protests in the city of Enrica. The league has issued the following statement regarding the situation. Due to safety reasons, the players are compromised during this time of trouble. We have decided to postpone the game. Moreover, we stand in solidarity with the fans, our players, and the people of Enrica in the fight against injustice. Mayor Curtin Lest... Wow, really? People name their kids crazy things, but to name your kid Curtin was also made a statement. It is a tragic day of Sordland where the president himself refused to act in the face of communism. It is said that inaction breeds doubt and fear. Thus I fear that the spread of communism has sown deeper inside the heart of the nation than we thought. However, I and the people of Enrica will never stop fighting for the soul of our great country. I believe all of this trouble actually started when it was the nationalists who killed this guy, the radical. Undemocratic elections of Sordland. Sordland has an electoral threshold of 10%. This means any political parties that are under 10% of the vote can't even enter the assembly. This is the very reason why the United Sordland Party holds 52% of the seats in the assembly today. It is also the reason why the largest ethnic minority of Sordland is non-existent in Sordish politics. The last elections have shown that the pro-Blutish WPB had an enormous voter base of just above 9%. But it still failed to meet the 10% threshold and couldn't enter politics. Similarly, the CPS has won around 8% of the general vote, but was eliminated. This means that millions of votes are not represented in our current government. Moreover, this has benefited the USP the most and gave them the lawmaking power. The undemocratic threshold needs to be lowered down so that there is true representation in the assembly and a true representation of our voices. No one can call Sordland a democracy without a decrease or a constitutional proposal that does not include such change. Democratic. What? Or a constitutional proposal that does not include... No one can call Sordland a democracy without a decrease. Or a constitutional proposal that does not include such change democratic. There's got to be a pause in there. Okay. More news from the front. Morna industrial output concerns. The mayor of Morna has reported that their industrial output numbers this year are 12% lower than last year. They are requesting additional support to improve their industrial capacity, including machinery and personnel, to combat the downward trend. With the construction of several new factories in Morna, the mayor stated his belief that an economic upturn in the city is still possible if government investments succeed. According to current projections, Morna is set to lose an additional 2% of industrial output next year. However, recent data from the municipality suggests that an investment worth several billions of SR will stop the downward trend and increase the industrial output in a short amount of time. I believe we also read that in Morbul, so Lauren right now seems to be suffering. Antel. Prisoner riot in Antel Rock Prison. Yesterday around 11 a.m., a prison riot started in Ward C of the Antel Rock Prison, which was eventually suppressed. Ward C is generally used for keeping political prisoners, and the riot started when a warden was killed by a British political prisoner. 4 guards and 21 prisoners died. 134 were injured. Criminy. Okay, that one can wait just a minute. USP report on reforms. Many members of the USP, led by Alvin Clavin and the reformist wing of the party, clarified their demands from the government in the party Congress. For the upcoming constitutional reform, Alvin Clavin stated that without ministry reforms, they won't be able to stand behind the new reform package. Okay. Presidential visit to Narbel. I was traveling to the snow-covered city of Narbel in the Nargis region for the Rural Development Forum organized by the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education. The mountainous city of Narbel had gritty tones to it. It's mostly regarded as one of the poorer cities in Sordland. Its people were hardy and wary. Even after the discovery of natural resources in the area, years of neglect by the central government were apparent on the buildings and the general infrastructure. Natural resources, namely gas and oil, were now under the control of Gassam, which elevated the corporation to a place of power. My task in this forum was mainly symbolic: fake smiles and handshakes with oil barons, meeting with local politicians, but most importantly of all, to make sure that Narbel does not feel like it was forgotten by the government. The scenery so far, however, was a reflection of Narbel's neglect. Main roads to the city were not maintained well. There were many bumps and empty, discolored spots in the asphalt. Navigating and swerving to avoid the inconveniences, our motorcade finally started nearing the city. As if my discomfort from the bumpy ride was apparent to him, Sergei rolled down the partition window. "We'll be arriving at Hotel West in a few minutes, sir." "Well, thank you for letting me know." "Anytime. It is my duty." After a moment, Sergei started to smile under his mustache. "What's the smile for?" "Sir, I just want to say it's been great these last 2 months. As you know, my wife, Susan, recently gave birth to our son, sir. And now my daughter just started at a very good high school in Holsword." "Well, that's great news, Sergei. I'm happy for you." "I appreciate it, sir, truly. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to afford a good private school if she scored less in the entrance exams. But I shouldn't have made my insecurity get to me. Erica outsmarts me all the time. I'm very proud to have a daughter like her." "I also hope that Diana will grow to be like her mother someday." "I'm sure she will, sir. After all, she is the daughter of a lion and lioness. My daughter looks up to the First Lady for inspiration, and it's not just limited to my daughter, sir. She's an inspiration for almost all women in the country. But at the same time, it must be hard for the First Lady as well. All this attention, adjusting to this new high-profile life, and a husband that has great responsibility." "Well, I mean, it's kind of hard for both of us, but we're not talking about me. So yeah, I guess you're right, it is hard for her." "It must be, sir. We sometimes forget the important people in life between all the responsibility and rush. You know, those we care for." "I mean, yeah, I agree." Sergei continued after a moment of silence. "Have I told you, sir? We named my son George. The doctors say he is very healthy, and thankfully so is my wife." "Yeah, okay. Tell me more about Susan. What kind of person is she?" "She has a good heart. Her family comes from Sarna, so they are a little more traditional. I really like her selflessness." I, I mean, I don't know how much of my own, I don't know. I feel like this is normal conversation, but, are we taking away from his time here? Although this is also very non-committal. Monica is persevering. It can be inspiring at times to have a partner like that. It's only fitting, a lioness for a lion. Yeah, see, we turned the conversation to me. Sergei sighed. I already started thinking about their university education, especially Erica. I wanted to send her to a good private school, but with the current state of the economy, it's going to be hard for us. Hoo boy. Hoo boy. Well, that's interesting. Boy, that would get him in my good books, though, wouldn't it? See, the thing is, I don't know when that stock thing that I invested in earlier is going to pay off, so I don't know when I'm going to get my money back. And I really don't want to, But why would they give me this option if this wasn't going to be important? You know what I mean? I'm metagaming here, but this is kind of an extreme option. Because these two are basically saying the same thing. One is a little bit more optimistic than the other, but they're basically saying the same thing. This is the only one that's okay, we'll do it, and I hope to God I don't have to pay for something up next. This could be a very bad choice here. You know what? I'll pay for the education. Mr. President, there's no way I can... With one look from me, Sergei cut his sentence short and nodded at me after removing his hat. Mr. President, I don't know how I can ever repay for this. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. money is never more important than education. Exactly, sir. You're right. I think I've decided. I will give your name to my boy. Instead of George? George Anton Volkner. George Anton Volkner. May he grow strong like you are. I mean, this is also a little bit self-serving here, isn't it? This is definitely self-serving, but this is, I don't know. This is totally non-committal. I'm sure he will. The car hit a major pothole and a bump which lifted us up in our seats for a second. Are you alright? Yes, sir. I hope the car is fine, too. It better be. I thought we were in an armored tank car here. The motorcade began approaching the hotel. The Hotel West was supposedly the best hotel in Narble. The large 25-story main building was undoubtedly one of the taller and more expensive buildings in the city. It towered over the nearby slums and had been a target for protests when it was first built. A crowd was gathered in front of the hotel with the welcoming committee at its center. As we approached the red-carpeted entrance, I could see the mayor of Narble and his top aides. Sergei got out of the car and opened the door. He bowed his head respectfully and gestured toward the entrance. See you later, Sergei. Thank you, sir. Likewise. As soon as I left the vehicle, the fresh air of Narble filled my lungs. Almost immediately, everyone present in the crowd flocked over to me in an excessive display of courtesy, smiles and handshakes while I donned the mask of a politician. A mask that I was very used to. Turn 3. I paid for Sergei's education. Okay. See, the fact that that pops up, that makes me feel like that was a big turning point thing. Like, that's going to be important at some point. Alright, let's read the news. Let's read the news and all that jazz. Protests appear calmer. As protests continue nationwide, tensions ease in some cities. I mean, they've burned each other's shit and have fought each other in the streets. I'm hopeful that this is going to burn itself out. Still, several major cities, including Dare and Lockhaven, did have some scattered reports of violence on Monday night. Tens of thousands in Dare, Circus's hometown, walked in a memorial march, though police moved in on the thinning crowd as the evening settled, making arrests. Authorities said demonstrators began throwing rocks and ignored orders to disperse. The protests in Holsord and in most other major cities appeared calmer, with fewer clashes between civilians and police. Authorities have made at least 9,800 arrests related to the protests, according to a tally from the state press. Okay, that's not helpful. It's no wonder there's prison riots. The Radical. Shocking misogynist rally. Every day we are appalled by how deep the roots of misogyny goes in our country. We are appalled again when yesterday, during a protest by the Sordland League of Women, counter-protesters showed up to disrupt the peaceful rally. In the resulting scuffle between police, the protesters, and the mob, many were arrested from both sides. The road to change is filled with real obstacles, but we said it before. We can do it. Sol needs to answer for his crimes. Looking at the history of everything wrong in our country, there is only one figure that everyone points at, Tarquin Sol. He has devolved our country into something much worse than it was before. Well, I'm not so sure about that, because according to our history, we were at one point a fascist military junta, so he's committed crimes against humanity. We all still remember the Izam incident and the wounds that have been inflicted on the hundreds of thousands of people with British ethnic background. We've been calling for his trial, and we believe it is time that this government opens the way for a fair trial by removing the undemocratic and absurd laws that protect him. It is time that the Constitution of 1929 that protects Sol be changed. People are still waiting for a fair trial, for justice to be served, and for their questions to be answered. Labor Union Right March. A large group of labor union members gathered around the city of Volgan to protest against the poor condition of worker rights in Sordland. People could be seen holding signs pleading for accountability and basic rights in corporate work environments. Dozens of tourist workers were in the midst of the crowd. One worker was heard saying, "I know the law gives us nothing on paper. Is this the reality we choose to accept?" Others pointed out that the country is relying on the workers to stop the recession, but doesn't give them anything back. Look at how great the rights are in Volksland. Minimum wage, overtime pay, and safe working regulations. The time for real workers' reform is now, one voice demanded with frustration. We had the opportunity to interview some open-minded managers from corporations. They relayed that the companies have little to no oversight. It's hard to disagree that the time for labor reform is long due. Albin Clavin from the reformist wing of the USP has seen the potential and announced that work has begun to explore what can be achieved. Will President Rayne listen to the demands? Time will tell. Okay, this kind of concerns me. Because we're currently having them build the railway. So... Education privatization proven successful. Our editorial team immediately analyzed the SIPTA report recently revealed to assess the standards of education. We were curious to see how the policies of the last decade have begun changing the performance metrics. Lesbia specifically stood out with a jump of 6 positions forward to 5th out of 68. After a research and analysis collaboration with the Vice President of Magnus Cartus and the SMEA chapter leader of OMEC, we began critical insights to how Lesbia increased its education quality. It boils down to 2 major points. One is the privatization efforts led by Prime Minister Alvarez that led to most schools in wealthier neighborhoods, 1,404 to be precise, to be privatized. This lifted a significant budget burden off the state because the wealthy paid for a great education for their kids and were still taxed reasonably in order to divert funds to state schools elsewhere. The second major factor was the allowance of minor curricular changes for private institutions that led to major improvements in the student participation, teacher happiness, and boosted the performance of the institutions. All in all, the improvements to the system and the massive amounts of 34 billion lira it raised for Lesbia made it a lucrative option. Sordland desperately needs more capital to tackle the recession, and when education is privatized, foreign capital will also aid in establishing quality schools. The Vice President of Magnus Cartus pointed out that the SIPA report doesn't include access to education metrics and that Lesbia has inequality problems. The statement that hasn't been proven with any statistical research from the OMEC, which is why it must be taken with a pinch of salt. The Rayne administration could be practical about this term and look to the Southern example on how to do positive change even though opposition from the Minister of Education is expected. Well, I mean, like, yeah, this is going to help no one. Okay. We'll read the news stuff, the reports and what not next time. Yeah. Okay, see you then.